Hello, well, this video will be basically a debunking one, and it's got to do especially with this Brian Foster-esque type of lost ancient technology, this lost high technology, persistent narrative which keeps going around. And I'll put some links in the description because I've already covered some of the stone cutting techniques which are still used by stonemasons today, part of an ancient tradition, using some very simple tools. Those links will be in the description where I go through even show how a lot of this stuff can be used. Well, is still being used today. They're still being practiced today. So those links will be in the description. I have to admit there are still a few curious elements in regards to some things that from the ancient past, but it's more about lost science techniques and using simple tools to achieve and simple techniques to achieve some astounding outcomes, and not much different from what was achieved in the 17th, 18th, even up to the early 19th century before a lot of the more advanced tools that we use now were around. People were still doing these things. It's recorded. People are still doing it now. They've got it on video. Those links will be in the description. But this whole ancient lost technology thing basically there's two questions. It's about to do with working and cutting stone and fitting stone together, and that also incorporates this type of area, which is the which is not all of the lost high technology crowd say are into the ancient anti-gravity, but it is in the same sphere of unresearched fluffiness, and this an echo chamber is the best way to describe it. And now first we'll look at ancient Rome. This is a depiction. Now, the Greeks and the Romans, still have so many records from them. We know that they achieved amazing things, and they moved and they cut stone and they did things in an amazing way. And again, in this lost high technology sphere, the Greeks and the Romans will be rarely, if ever, discussed, or they'll be, I have to say, shamefully diminished, because we have the records. We know how they did these things. They were very careful. They were very proud of them, and they recorded them in quite some detail. And this ancient technology can be directly connected to the previous civilizations from which they developed and learned. So, for instance, the Romans learned from the Greeks, who learned from Persians, who come from Babylonians, who learned from the ancient Indians and the Egyptians. It's part of a continuous stream. And in this picture here, and there are many similar ones from the Roman, the Greek period, many writings have been passed down where architects and engineers literally describe the processes of how they achieve these things. And we need to understand some basic high school physics explains 99.5% of what's out there is lost high technology. And so what's going on in this picture? Firstly, we need to focus on this part here, because especially through shipping, such as the Phoenicians, or the Canaanites as they were also called, were masters of shipping, and sailors depend on what might be described as ancient anti-gravity, lost high technology. And it's not high technology and it's not anti-gravity, it's just very clever, very simple physics. And so there I've zoomed in, and you see these coiled ropes and around the tackle. Now that's the same type of rigging that's been used since antiquity and up until the last days of well, even still now sailors use them. The older ships will have this type of rigging. The newer ships, of course, now it's more with modern ratchet type of equipment, but it's working on the same simple machine technology: the inclined plane, the gear, the lever, and well, the pulley. And so this is ship's tackle. Here's an example of a block. This is anti-gravity technology. There's no other way to put it, but it's actually, again, it's simple physics. Here's another example. This is from the carving to commemorate the lifting of the Lateran obelisk in Rome. It was moved by ship from Egypt, taken to Rome, then lifted and put back in place, over 400 tons. But this shows, again, the same technology, this ancient technology still in use today. It's one of the basic elements of physics. And what do we have? Well, I've just zoomed in. So we have, again, these coiled ropes. So who are just looped around, just like this, the rigging here in the ships, where we have these coiled loops, this is a pulley. It's a compound pulley, and it's a marvelous piece, a very simple piece of technology built on some very simple physics which have been passed down from antiquity. It's an ancient anti-gravity device, if you want to call it that. And well, that's what it looks like. That's what it is. It's a block and a tackle. It's a couple of pulleys. Now, you don't even need a pulley. You can do it with rope. And I'm going to put some instructional clips, which again you can Google it. It's on YouTube. Anyone who's calls themselves a researcher should be looking into this. Those such as Brian Foster who do not show you this do so deliberately, and I think that that's very deceptive, especially because they're charging money for it. Here's another example of this ancient lost high technology. It's a tripod, again with a block and tackle. These pulleys and these ropes being looped around, and this is an ancient anti-gravity device. Here's another example. So this is a pulley. Okay, so this does not help you at all. All it does is change the direction of the pull. So if you want to lift up, you pull down on the rope. There's no mechanical advantage to this. Keyword here is mechanical advantage. Google it, YouTube it, whatever you want to do, search it. This is the answer. This, or the gun tackle, where we have one pulley and then it's looped around, and I'll put an instructional clip, like a demonstration of how that is. But this is an anti-gravity technique. Okay, because if I pull down on this rope, I only have to pull up half the weight. I have to pull twice as much rope, but I pull up I have double the strength. Now, if I loop it once more, now I can lift. The weight is effectively 1/4 of the original weight, but I have to pull the rope 4 times longer. Now I do it once more, and now this is 1/8 of the original weight. So, for instance, if this was 1 ton, with this device, with these two pulleys, I only have to lift half a ton to lift the 1 ton. With this one now, it's down to 250 kilos, or whichever language you want to use. And now it's down to 125. So I can lift 1 ton with 125 kilograms of energy. I do it once more, and now at 62.5 kilos of energy, I can lift a 1 ton weight. This is the magic of the block and tackle. It is bloody magic, but again, it's simple physics, and again, I have to say it's shameful that there are certain people pushing this certain narrative, which is there are those who know, and I have to include Brian Foster amongst those. At the very least, someone who's printing books, taking people on tours, should have done a little bit of research along the way when he makes these statements. Before we go, I'd like to pause for a moment, and I'm going to play a series of easily accessible, very basic, so easy to Google stuff on mechanical advantage, pulleys, etc.
Wheel is used mainly for pulling things. It's called a pulley. And Jill can hitch the rope around it and use it to pull. No, Jack can use it to try to pull the pail of water up. That's funny. He needs just as much force to try to pull the pail of water up this way as he did trying to pull it up the other way. I wonder if there's a better way of rigging the pulley. Amazing. How did Jill manage it? Both she and Jack only had one pulley to work with, and yet Jill was able to pull up the pail with half the force that Jack needed. Well, when a pulley is set up like this, it's called a single fixed pulley. All it does is change the direction of your pull, but it doesn't reduce the force you need. But when a pulley is arranged like this, it's called a single movable pulley, and it halves the force you must exert, because the pail of water is now, in effect, being lifted by 2 ropes instead of 1. It's as if 2 people were lifting the pail, and it looks as if we're getting something for nothing again, doesn't it? But of course we're not. If we compare the distance that Jill raised the pail with the amount of rope she pulled, we see that it's the same old story. What she's gaining on the force, she's losing on the distance. The distance that she pulls the rope is twice the distance that she raises the pail. But the way Jill used the pulley is still twice as effective as the way Jack used it. There are lots of other ways of combining pulleys. The pulley system that Jill finally rigged up for herself. She had to pull the rope 3 meters for every meter that she raised the pail of water. In a sense, she'd become 3 times as strong as Jack.
The handle is so long, and so we speak of the mechanical advantage of a simple machine. Meaning what? How many times is the force multiplied when we apply a force? If, for example, with a force of 1 pound I can lift a ton, then the mechanical advantage is 2,000. Let me go further. Here is an interesting thing. Pulleys. Pulleys. Now it is very important that I say something about pulleys. When students and boys and girls study pulleys, it is usually said that to find the mechanical advantage of a pulley system, you count the number of ropes supporting the load. Now, I should say that this is not a good thing to do. It sometimes leads to the right answer, but often the right answer is gotten by physically wrong means. And this is a very important philosophy to remember. Getting the right answer is the least important of your endeavors. What must be right is the logical, analytical reasoning that leads to it. So I would urge you to study pulleys and learn how to find the mechanical advantage without counting the number of ropes. Here is a pulley system made up of 2 blocks with 3 sheaves each, or 3 pulleys each, rather, and I can lift an enormous force by the application of a small one.
Okay, we're going to do the truckee hitch. Very simple. First of all, 3 simple steps. First step, you go around the rail. So that's the first step. Second step, you go under the rope and grab this one and move this one up. So this is the second step. The third step, you put a loop in through this loop, and then another one on top, and through this one. And then you pull the rope a little bit. Make sure you lift this one up and pull. So this is called a single truckee hitch. Now to do the double, simply we just put it around again. Grab the rope underneath and lift it up, and then you do a loop, put this in, another loop, and put this in. You come off, put it back again. So what we need to do, we just have to pull this. So once it's done, we do a closed hitch to finish it. The closed hitch is one on the left and one on the right. And then you just pull up and down to secure.
Bloody magic. But again, it's simple physics, and again, it's I have to say it's shameful that there are certain people pushing this certain narrative, which is there are those who know, and I have to include Brian Foster amongst those. At the very least, someone who's printing books, taking people on tours, should have done a little bit of research along the way when he makes these statements and these claims, and they're bunkum in extremis. So this is what's happening here. This is like literally we have these records written down and passed on to us. It's high school physics. Just like with the stonework, anyone who's going to talk about stone and lifting ability should at least do a little bit of research on it, even just a little bit. You know, just take 20 minutes and just watch a few things or read a little bit. But again, if you're going to charge people and take people on tours to tell them bunkum, there's no excuse for that. It's shameful. Now, another one of these false narratives that's got passed around is Coral Castle and Ed Leedskalnin. Now, even when I first read, this is pretty amazing, but I've worked in the lifting industry, I've worked in the transport industry, and then it's like, well, hold on a minute, let's put these things together. And there's also plenty of video out there explaining all of this, but I'll include a little bit of that as well. So Ed Leedskalnin made his business to build this, charge people. This was his livelihood, and just like the circus owners, the mystery of this was the economic power. This was the marketing tool. And so, for instance, he said that he harnessed ancient technology that they used to build the pyramids to construct, so single-handedly construct this. Well, that's true. He did use ancient Egyptian knowledge and know how to construct it. And most people say that there was somehow some sort of magic levitation device in this box, but no, you can actually see what the magic levitation device is, and it's hanging here underneath. It's called a chain hoist. So no, there is no magic lifting box. That's again just not true. It was a clever bit of marketing on his behalf to make people believe this. And what the technology was something like this, and I'll show you a piece of video in a moment because you actually see him using it. It's actually on video, him using it, but you can see it in this picture. It's a chain hoist. It's a block and tackle. It's all. It's ancient shipping technology, ancient movement, ancient lifting technology. You can use this to lift, and you can also use it to pull. This device is working on exactly the same principle as this device as the ship's rigging. You just loop the rope through a few times, and each time you do another loop, you halve the amount of of energy required to lift the weight. You just have to lift longer. And I'll show you some clips in a moment. And that's all it is. It's a block and a tackle. He's actually even on a tripod. So again, it's a tripod with a block and tackle. Here's another example of it. That's it. That's the magic there. Here's his workshop, and you can actually see this is lifting equipment which he would have got from his hardware store or anywhere. This is exactly the type of stuff I'm talking. It's pulleys and chain, or you could use wire rope, you could use hemp rope, you could use leather rope. You just have to, if you're using a fiber rope, you just would have to double up and use more and braid it together to get the added strength. Of course, with modern times you'd use chain because it's got a much stronger lifting capacity. So one small bit of chain was the equivalent of one fat piece of rope in older times. But here we have the winch, we have pulleys, we have all of this. Here is the technology that he was using, ancient technology, just in a more modern iron and steel chain form. And well, another one of these things that in regards to the flywheel. Well, what's going on there is this. It's not ancient technology. At the time when he was alive, like in Popular Mechanics and all this type of thing, Tesla famously wrote about this. All these other electrical engineers wrote about it. It's a dynamo, and a perfect example of what was happening here is if you've ever seen this device, it's a dynamo. So you spin it around and it creates electricity. Now, if you ever use one of these, you know that it doesn't actually power too much light. And it was this hand cranked flywheel. Even visitors still report, who were there, who visited the site, say that he spun this and there was 2 light bulbs there. That's all that it powered. There's no mystery to it. It's just been exaggerated and passed on, and it becomes part of this narrative, which is built on on incorrect. It's purely it's incorrect. There's nothing special about it. And again, it's sad that you know we should be encouraging this type of knowledge, and but instead we this gets passed on, and then kids see it, and then they think, oh, this is mystic stuff. No, they can actually do it. If you go, it's beautiful science. It's knowledge is power, and this type of narrative is disempowering people. It's discouraging people from discovery and from understanding the physics and the forces of the natural world, which is a beautiful thing. And it's a sad thing when people promote this, especially those who know it's untrue. That is sinful in the extreme. It's one, we can't all know everything. No one knows everything. But when you do know it, and when you hide it from your audience to profit from it, there is no integrity in that. There is only bad things there's nothing good about it. Nothing at all. Okay, so again, we've seen the mystery tripod. Well, here's a piece of that video, and we'll look at that in a moment. Actually, I'll show that to you now. Okay, so here's an example of Ed Leedskalnin, and here we can see pulling on the block, not even breaking a sweat, and what he's doing is lifting a block of approximately 15 tons. Now, the heaviest block in Coral Castle was 30 tons. Again, well within the capacity for the off-the-shelf, relatively cheap, down at your local hardware supplier store. And again, we can see, there's the chain hoist right there, and they've doubled up. So again, no problem lifting the 30-ton blocks at all. And so, mystery solved. That's it. There's nothing to it. It's actually it's simple physics. It's off-the-shelf equipment. Anyone who's worked in construction, lifting, rigging, transport understands this. Anyone, and again, unfortunately, we have this persistent. Okay, so that's it. There's a mystery. It was no magic levitation box. He was using ancient technology of which they used to create the old stone magnificent temples of old, and that was using mechanical advantage. That's a block and tackle, or the same equipment is incorporated here into relatively modern chain hoist. Here we see the most modern version of it, and using the most modern steel with high tensile strength hooks that can support the weight. But again, this is an off-the-shelf piece of gear. All it is a series of pulleys, just like the looped rope. We're just looping these chains over, and you just pull down on this skinny little chain here on the side, and you can lift 100 tons on your own. Single person can lift 100 tons. You can get bigger ones of these. This is an off-the-shelf version. So the ancient technology of shipping and of moving stone is about rope, simple ropes, simple pulleys, and the inclined plane, the lever. Give me a lever and and a place to stand, and I shall move the earth, as was once famously said. So the mysterious tripod tool, it's not a mystery at all. Okay, then we have the 30-ton telescope towering 25 feet, perfectly aligned to the North Star. Polaris, the North Star. Here's a time lapse, so we see the stars all spinning, and they all spin around the North Star. So in itself, aligning something to the North Star is skillful, but with this equipment, with a little bit of shifting and moving, a lever and a bit of pulling and tugging, getting it into position, it is skillful, but by no means extraordinary. Again, not some ancient lost high technology, supernatural type of thing at all. It's basic equipment, basic know-how, age old, still in practice today. But as we move more and more to 3D printing and ordering, now you just ring something up and order it. We're losing these skills, we're losing this thing, and sadly we're losing the logic and the ability to see through bunkum, and that which has allowed this pure bunk and that's what it is to persist. And that's again quite a shame. So whether it's the 30-ton telescope or the 22-ton, that's it. It's a chain hoist. It's this simple mechanical advantage obtained by pulleys and simple machines. Now, one of the repeated examples that keeps doing the rounds in this particular so-called research truth-seeking field is the example of the levitated mass from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, installed in 2012. It weighs 340 tons and was, it's impressive. However, a lot of story connected to it is, well, to be blunt, is a lot of fluff. Very selective, very poorly researched, and we'll have a look at that. So this is a stone which was put in place eventually in 2012, 340 tons, but the story that keeps getting repeated is about the crane broke. So in 1969, the original concept was for a much smaller stone of 120 ton stone. However, the crane broke, and well, that's true. But what's projected onto this is that it was the equipment at the time was incapable of doing it. Again, that we cannot do these things now, but we don't have this lifting capacity. Well, we do, and this lifting capacity was well within the ancient times as well. So the column of Pompey, the moving of obelisks in the Roman period, even the in the 1500s up to the 1800s, such as Cleopatra's Needles, the obelisk in Paris, etc., all within with older technology. However, again, this is a repeated theme that the crane broke, therefore it can't be done. Well, the issue was not because cranes in 1969 couldn't lift 120 tons, but because they cheaped out and they used the wrong crane. And for example, here's this, again, search term, 1969 cranes over 120 tons capacity. Here's one on the market, 150 ton capacity. There were actually larger cranes available in 1969. And so, for instance, this one, this one is sitting in the yard somewhere, dismantled, but 190 feet of main boom still with it. So, again, no. The cranes did exist at the time. The person who, the project manager should have got his ass handed to him for doing a bad job and cheaping out, using the wrong crane. And even what should have been done was that they should have used a gantry crane as well. They should have it should have been set up on site and used to lift it onto whatever particular mode of transport they were going to use. So number one, this whole story about it broke the crane and it's super heavy. No, it isn't. It's actually a bad project manager who used the wrong crane. A specialized trailer had to be used to move a stone. That's true. Okay, but again, this small bit of truth is then used to project some very untruthfulness. Maybe even not deliberate, but still, let's put the story into some perspective. Now, this particular trailer, yes, it was a specialized moving trailer, but why did they have to use this? Well, firstly, the trailer was not to support the weight. This was not necessary to support the weight. What the real issue is, well, for instance, these shackles supported the weight of the trailer. You could have used a much smaller piece. What the real issue was one about money and avoiding a huge bloody bill. And what do I mean by that? Why was a specialized overly long trailer used? Well, the trailer was used to distribute the weight across quite a distance and to spread the weight across the road. Here's an example of a weight limit sign. Like you see, these are just all over the place. This smaller truck with 2 axles is allowed to only travel on the road with an 8-ton load. The 3-axled truck has a 12-ton load. The 4-axled truck truck has a 16-ton load, because the longer the trailer, the more it distributes the weight, and so the more you are allowed to carry it. And why is that important? Well, again, just Google these things. This is not a hard thing to do but for instance, so it's about $3 to $5 million per mile for road in urban areas, and this moved mainly through urban areas. So what you're looking at is now they had to avoid bridges and start again, and that they had to avoid these bridges is pushed because the bridges couldn't support the weight. Well, of course they couldn't support the weight. They're not designed to support those weights. It's an economic factor. You don't build bridges on the one-off chance that sometime in the future there might be a one-off specialized project to carry this extremely large weight across, which is just not common practice. So bridges are built, people do things economically, and economic factors are the driving force behind this. And so was the use of this trailer, because it's $3 to $5 million per mile of road. They had to take a 106-mile route, avoiding bridges, because the bridges, of course, are not, were never designed to build that to support that load. There are bridges that support that load. For instance, here in Sydney, that you go underneath the runway, and that has to support much more, but the bridge is much more reinforced. It's a different type of bridge. The construction methods, all of that is completely different. So it's not but the point is that a 106-mile road times 3 million, and this is on the lower end of 3 million per miles, they might have been looking at a $318 million bill for the roads that they destroyed. So they would, because of the weight, this is with the asphalt or a few inches of concrete. That's why the weight had to be distributed. That's why this specialized trailer had to be used. That's why it had to go slow. All these other things, that comes back to this. And so it was not the weight of the stone that was the decisive factor in using this particular trailer. It was the weight limit of the roads, and a possible bill from anywhere from $318 to $530 million would have been the price that would have been that they could have had to have paid if it was done otherwise. And that's why they needed special permission. That's why they needed this special trailer, so that each part of the road underneath the axle was only was distributing the weight across. The shackles supported the weight of the stone. A smaller steel frame could have easily supported it, and they could have done it on lesser wheels. You can even see the distribution of the wheels. It's not like all those little wheels all close together, for instance, when you might have seen some other heavy move objects. This is relatively light in a lot of ways. There's a lot of other similar type of trailers used to lift and move heavier loads with their wheels much closer together. That's to support the weight. The gaps between these wheels is to spread the weight across quite a large area, and therefore not to destroy this road, which might have only a 20-ton limit. And that's the reason for it. It's as simple as that. So in conclusion, again, some of the details are correct, but the narrative surrounding this is pure and utter bunk.